6, crush the anti-fascist mob. The transvaluation of all values throughout the West, the invention of ever more victim groups, the spread of affirmative action programs, and the relentless promotion of political correctness has led to the rise of an anti-fascist mob, tacitly supported and indirectly funded by the ruling elites. This self-described mob of social justice warriors has taken upon itself the task of escalating the fight against white privilege through deliberate acts of terror directed against anyone and anything deemed racist, right-wing, fascist, reactionary, incorrigible, or unreconstructed. Such enemies of progress are physically assaulted by the anti-fascist mob. Their cars are burned down, their properties are vandalized, and their employers are threatened to dismiss them and ruin their careers. All the while, the police are ordered by the powers that be to stand down and not to investigate the crimes committed or persecute and punish the criminals. In view of this outrage, public anger must be aroused, and there must be clamoring far and wide for the police to be unleashed and this mob beaten into submission. Now, a query again for libertarians and the stupids for liberty, who are sure to object to this demand on the ground that the police asked to crush the anti-fascist mob are state police. Question to them, do you also object on the same grounds that the police arrest murderers or rapists? Aren't these legitimate tasks performed also in a libertarian order by private police? And if the police are not allowed to do anything about this mob, isn't it okay then that the target of these attacks, namely the so-called racist right, should take the task upon itself and of giving the social justice warriors a bloody nose? 7, crush the street criminals and gangs. In dispensing with the principle of the equality before the law and awarding all sorts of group privileges, except to the one group that I mentioned, the ruling elites have also dispensed with the principle of equal punishment for equal crime. Some state-favored groups are handed more lenient punishment for the same crime than others, and some especially favored groups are simply let run wild and go practically unpunished at all, thus actually and effectively promoting crime. As well, no-go areas have been permitted to develop where any effort at law enforcement has essentially ceased to exist and where violent thugs and street gangs have taken over. In view of this, public furor must be provoked and it be unmistakably demanded that the police crack down quick and hard on any robber, mugger, rapist, and murderer, and ruthlessly clear all current no-go areas of violent gang rule. Needless to say that this policy should be colorblind, but if it happens to be, as it in fact is, that most street criminals or gang members are young black or Latino males, or in Europe, young immigrant males from Africa, the Middle East, the Balkans, or Eastern Europe, then so be it. And such human specimen then should be the ones that most prominently get their noses bloodied. And needless to say also that in order to defend against crime, whether ordinary street crime or acts of terrorism, all prohibitions against the ownership of guns by upstanding citizens should be abolished. 8, get rid of all welfare parasites and bums. To cement their own position, the ruling class has put the underclass on the dole and thus made it the most reliable source of public support. Allegedly to help people rise and move up from the underclass to become self-supporting actors, the real and actually intended effect of the state's so-called social policy is the exact opposite. It has rendered a person's underclass status more permanent and made the underclass permanently grow. And with this, of course, also the number of tax-funded social workers and therapists assigned to help and assist this group. For in accordance with exact economic law, every subsidy awarded on account of some alleged need or deficiency produces more, not less, of the problem that it is supposed to alleviate or eliminate. Thus, the root cause of a person's underclass status, that is, his low impulse control and high time preference, that is, his uncontrolled desire for immediate gratification, and the various attendant manifestations of this cause, such as permanent unemployment, poverty, alcoholism, drug abuse, domestic violence, divorce, female-headed households, out-of-wedlock births, rotating shack-up male companions, child abuse, negligence, and petty crime is and are not alleviated or eliminated, but systematically strengthened and promoted. Instead of continuing and expanding the increasingly unsightly social disaster, it should be abolished and be loudly demanded that one takes heed of the biblical exhortation that he who can but will not work also shall not eat, and that he who truly cannot work due to severe mental or physical deficiencies be taken care of by family, community, and voluntary charity. 9, get the state out of education. Most, if not all, social pathologies plaguing the contemporary West have their common root in the institution of public education. When the first steps were taken, well more than 200 years ago in Prussia, to supplement and ultimately replace a formerly completely private system of education with a universal system of compulsory public education, the time spent in state-run schools did, in most cases, not exceed 4 years. Today, throughout the entire Western world, the time spent in institutions of public education is, at a minimum, around 10 years, in many cases, and increasingly so, 20 or even 30 years. That is, a large or even the largest part of time during the most formative period in a person's life is spent in state-funded and state-supervised institutions, whose primary purpose, from the very beginning, it was not to raise an enlightened public, but to train good soldiers and later on good public servants, not independent and mature, mündige Bürger, but subordinate and servile Staatsbürger. The result? The indoctrination has worked. The longer the time a person has spent within the system of public education, the more he is committed to leftist egalitarian ideas and has swallowed and wholeheartedly internalized the official doctrine and agenda of political correctness. Indeed, in particular among social science teachers and professors, people not counting themselves as part of the left have practically ceased to exist. Consequently, it must be demanded that the control of schools and universities be wrested away from the central government and in a first step be returned to regional, or better still local and locally funded authorities, and ultimately be completely privatized so as to replace a system of compulsory uniformity and conformity with a system of decentralized education that reflects the natural variation, multiplicity, and diversity of human talents and interests. And 10, and last, don't put your trust in politics and political parties. Just as academia and the academic world cannot be expected to play any significant role in a libertarian strategy for social change, so with politics and political parties. After all, it is the ultimate goal of libertarianism to put an end to all politics, to subject all interpersonal relations and conflicts to private law and civil law procedures. To be sure, under present, all pervasively politicized conditions and involvement in politics and party politics cannot be entirely avoided. However, in any such involvement, one must be keenly aware of and guard against the corrupting influence of power and the lure of money and perks that comes with it. And to minimize the risk and temptation that comes from this, it is advisable to concentrate one's effort on the level of regional and local rather than national politics, and there to promote a radical agenda of decentralization, of nullification and peaceful separation, segregation, and secession. Most importantly, however, we must take heed of Ludwig von Mises's life motto, "Do not give in to evil, but proceed ever more boldly against it." That is, we must speak out whenever and wherever, whether informal or informal in gatherings, against anyone affronting us with the by now only all too familiar political correct drivel and left egalitarian balderdash, and unmistakably say, "No, hell no, you must be kidding." And in the meantime, given the almost complete mind control exercised by the ruling elites, academia, and the mainstream media, it already acquires a good portion of courage to do that. But if we are not brave enough to do so now, and thus set an example for others to follow, matters will become increasingly worse and more dangerous in the future, and we, and Western civilization, and the Western ideas of freedom and liberty will be wiped out and vanish. Thank you very much.